I want to start off with the sessions already because that's what you guys are here for. And the first one is headed up by our GM, Shlomo Weiss. And he's going to talk to you guys about what value means to us and set up sort of the theme of the day with value for your software. So with that, Shlomo.
All right, am I on? Yep, okay. Good morning, everyone. I would say it's great to see you all, but all I can see are lights, so it was great to see you earlier. Excited to be here, another Licensing Live. There's a lot of planning that goes into this event, and like Jam said, really the focus for this year is around the concept of value. We talk to a lot of different customers of ours of how they're trying to generate value from their offerings. And given that many people in the room here, if not all the people in the room here, are involved in driving licensing initiatives, monetization programs, I thought it would be a good idea to focus in my session here around how when we're working with our customers, how are they approaching the concept of generating value through their licensing initiatives. So before I get to that though, I want to start off with the first polling question. The slide's moving, okay. In your apps, right, so hopefully you've all downloaded, or many of you have downloaded the apps. You can go into your app, and there should be the polling question there, the first polling question, because we want to get to know who is here in the audience. What type of company are you? Right? Are you an equipment manufacturer, meaning your primary revenue is from equipment, hardware? Are you a software vendor? Or are you really seeing strong revenue streams from both hardware and from software? So we'll give it a minute here and see as the results are tallied live in front of us. Okay. So it looks like it's settling in that about a quarter of the people here are selling software only, right? No hardware, no equipment. 11% or 10% or so equipment only, which means that if you add up the both and the equipment, about 75% of you here are selling both hardware and software. If I remember correctly, I asked the same question last year, and it's approximately the same results, which is interesting, and it's really pretty indicative of the trends that we're seeing in working with different companies and really helping them make these business transformations. Okay, so when we talk internally at Gemalto about the concept of value, we often talk about how it really means different things to different people. Just on a personal note, so you see a picture with a diamond and right, a diamond in the rough, a diamond in the coal here. When my grandfather, before he immigrated to the United States, he was living in Europe, he was in Belgium at the time, and he had two options in front of him. He was going to learn a trade, and his choices were the diamond business or pocketbooks. And he looked at the diamonds and he said, what is the value in a diamond, right? There's no intrinsic value in a diamond. Maybe it's just a fad. So he chose pocketbooks, right? That was his decision. And so for him, it was really, again, value is in the eye of the beholder. He didn't really see the value in diamonds. Obviously, most people in the world today, I think, see the true value in those diamonds. And so it really is a personal viewpoint, different viewpoints in terms of what that value is. And we see the same when talking to, hold on, is this working? Okay. We see the same when working with our customers, right? When different companies that are looking into launching monetization initiatives and licensing programs, we talk to them about what is ultimately the value, what is the business impact that they're looking to gain through these initiatives that they're driving. And every company is looking at it from different perspectives, right? Depends on their industry, depends on where they are in terms of their competitive positioning, industry dynamics, internal dynamics, etc. And they're looking at it from different views of what's important to them as a business. And typically what happens is we sit down and we say, okay, what are you trying to do? And they'll say things like, oh, we want to launch self-service for our customers, right? We want them to be able to manage their licensing deployments on their own. Automatic updates. We want to launch a subscription model. We want to go into new markets like the Internet of Things. All sorts of different topics that are coming up in different areas of focus. But ultimately what we talk to them about is, okay, what's the business value that you're trying to generate? And it typically comes down to four things. Right? If you're looking at revenue generation, for example, when you're talking about new business models or other variety of things, we talk to them about operational efficiency. Third is around getting business insights to really understand how their customers are purchasing and how their business is running. And the fourth is around customer satisfaction, to gain a better experience for their customers. Because if they're just talking about things, for example, like self-service or mention Internet of Things or automation, it's very hard to really quantify what does that mean in terms of business impact. And so we try to drive the conversations, and typically it ends up in these four buckets. But it doesn't just stop there. Then we go to the next level of discussion, and we usually realize that there are different people that we're talking to within the organization, and they come with their own perspectives. So one might say, oh, for us the most important thing is we want to drive revenue. Another might say for them it's customer experience, right? And it really depends on where they're sitting within the organization. Right? Where they're sitting is what they see. So whether it's from product management, has certain goals, whereas operations or finance or whatnot, they're all looking at it a little bit differently. And so let's go back and let's talk a little bit more detail about each of those four elements that I mentioned before. So again, creating revenue streams, improving operations, operational efficiency, gaining business insights, and increasing customer satisfaction. In terms of creating revenue streams, so again, we have many different conversations with our customers, and it typically falls into three categories. One is about generating brand new revenue streams, right? That might mean taking a new product to market and attaching a licensing model to that. It might mean taking existing products and changing the licensing model in order to address new markets. It could be around flexible packaging to target different segments. And when we try and work with our customers in order to not just talk about what they're trying to accomplish, but also to quantify what their goals are, oftentimes, they're talking about looking at gains of revenue of 20%, if not more, from just generating these new revenue streams. Another area is around minimizing what we call revenue leakage, right? So it's from unauthorized use. Sometimes it's intentional that customers or not customers or people are coming and trying to steal illegally the software. And other times it's unintentional. There's one company that we're working with. They're a provider of products and software and services for the commerce and logistics space. And what they estimate is that around 15% of their customers are overusing the licenses unintentionally. And that's not uncommon. We often find it's anywhere from 15, 20, even up to 30% of unintentional use, which basically means that they're leaving revenue on the table. The third area is around maximizing revenue opportunities. So that means looking at our existing customer base and even how do you generate more revenue from your existing customers. That could be from offering new products within the try and buy model to existing customers and letting them trial your products. It could mean from being able to track renewals and ensure that you're getting to them and the renewals on time and extending those. Upsell and cross-sell initiatives as well. One customer that we're working with now and we're in the process of deploying with them. In the business plan, in the business case with them, they're looking at a 10% increase in revenue annually per customer for the existing customers just by implementing their licensing and having a better tracking of what customers are doing in terms of renewals and being able to have an efficient way of upselling and cross-selling. And so these are typically, in the creating revenue streams, right, it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around of how do we quantify this in terms of really what are the business objectives. And that's what it comes down to. The second area is around improving operational efficiencies. And that usually comes down to how do we simplify business processes, right? Through automation, through unifying an approach to licensing, ensuring business continuity by having a scalable and a robust system in order to ensure that that licensing system, the solution that's going to be in place, is really going to be able to grow with the company. Around minimizing business risk, right? And continuity, being able to support the long-term roadmap, being compliant with the changing regulations in the market. And finally, reducing operational overhead. And again, that could be by unifying systems, by having software-centric processes and more. And there are many different ways to really look at these things. Okay, but what is ultimately the value here that this is bringing to the business? And so we've seen companies look at it and measure it from anything from reducing in support costs. So going back to the company that I mentioned earlier that is looking at how they get better at upsells, they're also looking over here. They're a company in the risk management space for financial institutions, right, of how do they reduce their support calls related to licensing? Because currently 25% of the support calls are licensing related, which is not uncommon. And that's something that could be quantified in terms of really what is the impact if you can reduce that. Another area we see from many companies is around M&A, right? Companies that are very acquisitive and that today, the companies tell us that it could take them, in some cases, 18 to 24 months, if not more, in order to integrate companies that they're acquiring. One company that we've worked with recently has reduced that to a matter of months in terms of the integration post-acquisition because they have implemented this single licensing platform. Another area is just even around the steps it takes to onboard a customer or from the quote to cash process. It's looking at minimizing the number of steps. And we have customers that minimized it from by 30% to 50%, and that has a cost, right? Every one of those steps has a cost on the organization, on the people that needs to be able to focus on this. So there's really looking at improving operational efficiency. It's important then to take it to the next level and really talk about what is really the value, what is the business impact here. The third area that I want to touch on is around gaining business insights. Right? Can you anticipate your customer attrition by seeing, what's their usage? How is the tracking the entitlements, activations, and whatnot? Can you identify potential revenue loss? Right? Seeing who is renewing and who's not renewing. Around things like customer churn, being able to anticipate customer churn, and finally, really getting an understanding of knowing your customer. Right, Jem mentioned some things like software updates, and by having that connectivity to the customer, you can really understand what are they using of yours, what is the environment that they're deploying in, and to gain those business insights, which again is something that can really help drive more value within your company. And finally, around customer satisfaction, which is an area that I would say we've seen really a lot more licensing initiatives in the last year or two that are focused on customer satisfaction. One is around, how do you improve customer satisfaction through licensing? Well, you give customers more choice. You give them flexibility of the different packages of the software that they can offer and how they can purchase from you. You can keep the customers up to date through automatic updates and upgrades. And you can also help by providing self-service capabilities to your customers so that they have an insight and that they can manage their software and that they can manage the deployments of their licensing on their own in a low-touch environment. What we often find is customers or companies that we work with, right, are measuring, they think about how do we measure customer satisfaction and how do we measure that in terms of business impact. So one way is looking at reducing churn, right? So that commerce and logistics provider of software and technologies that I mentioned, what they're looking at is by introducing customer self-service, they anticipate that that's going to reduce churn between 5 and 10% on an annual basis. And 5 and 10% in churn reduction is huge because if you're in a subscription business, it's critical to keep your churn to a minimum so that it doesn't offset any gain that you're having in new business, right? You don't want to have driving growth of new customers only to be declining in revenue because of churn. And so that's pretty significant. Other companies look at NPS scores, right? Net promoter scores. By having self-service, by having customer flexibility, what's the net promoter score? And there are studies of every point of net promoter score, then how much more value can that bring to your company, and so on and so forth. And so really what we're finding is many companies are looking at and what we encourage also is to truly see how you can quantify really the business impact of these licensing initiatives in order to make sure that everyone is aligned in terms of what the goals are. And to bring that all together, let's see if this is working, okay. To bring it all together, we talk about this internally about this journey to creating value. Right, so we saw before that around 75% of the people in this room are either selling hardware and software, 25% or so are software vendors, right? And it sounds simple enough. You're taking your solution to market, either direct or through a channel, right? You bring it to customers and ultimately to succeed with those customers. But then when you start adding the different elements, like, okay, how are we going to generate new revenue streams with flexible packaging, try and buy licensing, we want to start tracking expirations, renewal notifications. Then you add the complexities of operational efficiency, everything from automated delivery, remote activations, back office integration, right? These are just some examples of some of the things you can do. The third element here is around customer satisfaction, right? We mentioned self-service, auto updates, etc. And finally, business insights, right? To truly understand the activations, tracking entitlements, renewals, generate reporting, and having a really good view and a good sense of what your customers are doing. And so what started off as like a simple, end-to-end, just go from one point to the next, becomes a complex-looking, train map, subway map, underground, metro, depends, where you've visited before. And just like, when first time you go onto a subway, or I remember the first time I was in France and went into the metro, it looks all confusing if you don't know how to read the map. But just like, and just in those situations where you see and you realize that people are getting on and off at different stops and there are different routes, so too with companies are taking a different path in this journey. Right? There's different priorities. Again, if we think back to the beginning of the business impact that the companies are looking to create, or are looking to generate the value, right? They have different priorities. Some it's revenue streams and operational efficiency. For others, it's all about customer satisfaction, or a combination of all. And so they have a different path in order to gain and create that value that they're looking to achieve through the licensing system. But for us, what we find is ultimately important in working with the companies that succeed, it's really critical for them to get on the same page across the different functions within that organization. Right? We had that slide on the different personas, and everyone looks at it from a different perspective. And so ultimately, it's critically important that you have a clear definition of the journey that you're looking to take within your company, and also a clear understanding of what is the value and how to quantify that value in order to ensure that everyone is going along the same path. So before I wrap that up, I want to ask a question here. Again, the second polling question. What are your primary goals of your software licensing initiative? And now in many places that we see, in most companies really, they have more than one goal, but typically there's one that is the primary goal, and then there's the secondary one. So I'm going to ask you to think for a minute or two, and really in your own licensing initiatives, what is your primary goal? Is it by creating new revenue streams? Is it improving operational efficiencies? Is it increasing customer satisfaction? Or is it gaining business insights? And so let's see how this is turning out. Jam and I had a little side bet of what was going to be the winner here. I think I'm winning, Jam. You owe me a bottle of wine, right? Yes. All right. We'll give it another second to settle here. But it's really interesting to see this. I think, in many cases here, and, I think a lot of our team could attest to it, when people start thinking about licensing, it often does start on the create revenue, new revenue streams, and it's often driven from that business side, but then it starts to, delve into some of the other areas. And so this is really, I think, very interesting results for us. One thing that I'm not sure of how that adds up to more than 100%, but... Oh, you could choose more than one? Is that right? Okay. All right. Wasn't sure. Okay. All right. So those are really, quite interesting results for us. So I'm just going to end off with just paraphrasing Peter Drucker. Right? Peter Drucker famously said, "If you can't measure it, you can't improve it." When we look at licensing initiatives and monetization programs, we really believe that if you can't measure it, then you can't value it. And it's critical to be able to put a value to what you're trying to achieve in order to successfully deploy and drive these licensing initiatives. We're going to hear throughout the day today from different speakers and industry experts about how companies are approaching this and approaching driving value. And for us, it's really something that we've seen. It's the companies that are most successful at it have clear alignment across organizations as well as at the executive level in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Jan mentioned the Business Experience Center over here, and I just want to really highly recommend that you go take a look during the breaks today, because if you want some advice and some insight into how our team has worked with many different companies in helping them really quantify the value and look at the value that they can generate from those 4 different buckets that we mentioned, then I really suggest that you go speak to our experts during the breaks. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you very much.